Hello, everyone. Welcome to yet another Lemnis podcast where we speak with thought leaders from the world of digital customer experience data, MarTech. Today, it's my pleasure to welcome and introduce Manu Lavanya, Director and COO at Max Life Insurance. Manu is a senior global leader with 24 years plus of experience successfully creating, transforming, and scaling businesses across multiple industry domains and geographies like US, Latin America, Eastern Europe, UK, and India. As the COO at Max Life, Manu is responsible for providing executive leadership to operations, underwriting, claims, digital transformation, IT, quality and innovation, service excellence, and other such functions. His ultimate goal is to help Max Life craft superior customer experiences. Prior to this, Manu has had remarkable stints at Incido, Brilio, Cognizant, and ITC, leading multiple roles in tech, digital transformation, and overall business leadership. Welcome, Manu. It's great to have you here today.
Thank you so much.
Great. So our second speaker is our usual suspect, Subra Krishnan, the CEO at Lemnis. So Lemnis is a leading customer data platform company. Very recently, Lemnis got featured in Forrester's Real-Time Interaction Management Report, probably the only one from India. He really leads the entire product vision and evangelization of CDP itself at Lemnis. Prior to Lemnis, Subra was with Vizuri. Vizuri is a leading ad tech company, and Subra saw through all various business leadership roles, product roles, and so on. And it culminated finally into his role as a CEO, where he successfully led the acquisition by a company called Affle. Right. So hi and welcome again, Subra. Pleasure. So. Diving straight into the topic for today, right, which is building a digital first insurance company. Who better to have you with us here than you, Manu? So to begin with, Manu, very briefly, if you could just walk us through the highlights of your professional journey leading to your current role, which is at Max Life. And what we're really interested in this is not really a resume walkthrough, but more of how the industry evolved and how you as a part of that industry sort of evolved. As we know, in the past 2 decades, the rate of digital transformation has just exponentially increased, right? And straight after this pandemic, it's a crazy rate now. So yeah, just some perspectives from you on that.
Sure, Shilaka. Thank you. First of all, thank you, Subra. Thank you, Shilaka, for this invitation. Really glad to be here. Glad to be sharing my views on a topic that is very close to my heart, digital transformation. Right, and I have had the I would say unique opportunity of seeing that transformation happen in some ways across 3 very different sectors. Right, the manufacturing sector, where my life started with ITC. The whole digital and IT sector itself, where it was more a vehicle of driving transformation for many customers across the world, and finally now I'm seeing in insurance as a vertical. So I joined just 6 months ago in Max Life Insurance, and it's been I would say a fantastic transition of a journey. If I think about the question, Shalaka, I think the first 7 years in ITC were really more about manufacturing, right? But even then, I would say about 3 or 4 years into my stint with ITC, company was fairly progressive, as it continues to be today in terms of application of technology into FMCG sector, right? In thinking about what's required for a long-term technology transformation, and how do you drive the technology platform as a differentiation for driving competitive differentiation for manufacturing, right? So ITC went through one of the very earliest big bang SAP implementations back in 1999. Right? Very few companies, Tata Steel, Arvind Mills, were the only few companies that were really aspiring at that time to do a big bang SAP sort of implementation. And I think ITC had a great vision in terms of what sort of a foundation would be required to drive the future of digital that was yet to come, right? And but I'm sharing that I was very lucky to be part of that initiative. And that's where my love for technology and digital started. Very quickly, I realized it was so exciting. Uh, and what ERP projects do, so far in Sri Lanka, is that they also give you a very horizontal view of the organization and rather just a function view, right? Because suddenly the consultants would come and tell me, you know what, you press one click out here, and somewhere else in the process something else breaks. So everything else is connected, right? So um, the first thing I did after spending a couple of years in ITC with that project was that I realized how adequate I was in terms of knowledge across my manufacturing domain, which was sales, technology, operations. Operations was my forte, but more around sales, finance, technology. Led me to quit my job after that project and do a full-time MBA, because you feel so inadequate that there's so much beyond your function that an ERP project typically exposes you to. I think that, and that's where my love of technology started. Post my ISB had just opened that time as an institution. Great 1 year, met some very, very amazing people to be my peers in my class. And then the journey really into technology started with Cognizant. And, I think over the next 12 years that I spent in Cognizant, I saw that $138 million company to begin with transforming into a 12 to $13 billion giant in those 12 years. And again, the common theme there was this was one of the companies that very quickly realized that the differentiation does not lie only in foundations of IT. The differentiation lies in knowing your customer better. The differentiation lies in analytics, in data. The differentiation lies in building customer experiences. The differentiation lies in building a scalable infrastructure that helps you do all of the above, right? So a very strong orientation towards what Cognizant called at that time the future of work, right? And how do we start bringing together the whole perspective around what does future of work mean in the context of customer relationship management, customer acquisition, provisioning, sales, operational excellence. What does it mean in these contexts, right? And why can't we experience technology the same way we experience on a Sunday evening? Why can't we experience technology the same way on a Monday morning? So that was one secular change. I saw that the focus in early 2000 was around arbitrage, right? Cost arbitrage. That, hey, I've got a global offshoring model. There are many companies, as you can see around today, were successfully built on the idea of global development models, right? And then slowly the shift started happening from an arbitrage model to a value provisioning model, right? Where people said that, hey, you know what, we can always leverage a global presence, not only for cost, but also for value, but also for new capability, right? That's when you saw components of innovation getting delivered in a global delivery model, right? So if you see the early, I would say 2010, 2011 timeframes, we had moved beyond the idea of, just offshoring and global development for arbitrage. The idea was more around, okay, how do I now start looking at cloud? How do I start looking at, scalable data infrastructure? How do I start looking at the newer the UI UX, the customer experience part of the business, right? And suddenly we had a huge push towards now what has become the digital revolution, right? It started with SMAC. People first thought, hey, because everybody had their own definition of what digital meant. Some people said SMAC, some people said something else, some people said IoT, mobility. And slowly now, at least now, the world has started converging to an understanding that digital was never about a technology. One, it was about a mindset. It was about transforming the way the business does its business today, right? And not just what technology is used for leveraging it. Right? And that transformation happened, and so after 2014, when that was a very opportune moment for me to, try a startup world where we moved away from Cognizant and started up a firm called Video Technologies, really focusing only on digital transformation and how to drive capability where we can use really the new know-how to start transforming our business for our clients in a way that it fundamentally changes their ability to attract new customers, in a way where it fundamentally changes the way they're able to drive efficiency in their operations, and in a way where each and every process that they do is more intelligent than they would experience before. Right? So that was the journey for the next, I would say, 5 years. I was there, and extremely. That's where my partnership with Rahul began, and extremely proud to share that the value creation was also recognized externally in 2018, end of 2018, early 2019, is when Bain Capital took over a majority stake in William, right? And then I had to move because of some reasons. I had to move north. I got a very different sort of opportunity to really transform myself from a digital IT industry background to more of a B2C insurance background, right? And so that is a big change for me, big change, very frankly. But I was so glad to see that the things don't really change so much in terms of what digital can do for businesses, right? And this opportunity I have today just is a great opportunity for me to apply whatever I've helped many of my customers do in a different scale and different context, and really take that learning and apply it to an India context in a large scale B2C space where you have 45 lakh customers, where you have 50,000 agents, right? How do you transform and touch their lives through transformation?
So, I mean, I think, Manu, you've made a perfect segue to the next section. So, I mean, COVID, etc. aside, maybe the question gets a little more flavor just because of COVID. But I would love to understand from both you as well as Subra, and maybe Subra, you can go first on this one. Is, especially because of this pandemic now, what do you think has sort of changed in insurance, right? And we have a lot of, some of the best topmost Indian insurance clients, be it in life, general insurance, and so on. And we know few basics that, we love clients who are as invested into it as we are, right? So all that aside, what do you think has sort of changed in the way that, insurance is being led and pivoted now? And Manu, maybe after that, when you answer the question, we would love to hear both from an industry perspective and from a consumer insights and consumer behavior habit kind of a perspective, which I saw you touched upon a little bit, but maybe you can expound on it a little more. Yeah, sure. Please go ahead, Subra.
I'll go very quickly first, but obviously, I'm fascinated to hear what Manu would say on this topic, right? So for me, irrespective of the business, everything starts with unit economics, and I find that trying to understand anything that happens, whether it's a pandemic or anything else, trying to apply and see what is the impact on unit economics is really the place to try and unravel a complexity like the pandemic, right? So I think and part of why something like COVID has been so complicated is because trying to assess its impact on unit economics is also fairly tricky, right? So on the one hand, for insurance like life insurance, for an industry like life insurance, you see that a pandemic has brought, for example, a greater awareness, about life insurance as a category. There are people who are starting to apply for life insurance now, right? So which is the positive. But then when you try to understand, when you try to dig a little deeper and say, okay, how is the demand going to play out, you see that it's a lot more complicated than that, because you see that there is a challenge in servicing that customer, fulfilling that customer's requirement. There's this challenge that the customer has probably is taking a decision which is suboptimal for themselves because there's a shortage of funds on their side. Or it could be as simple as, okay, if I go for a higher cover, I have to go for a health checkup. How will I do that in this pandemic, right? So you're seeing that play out, and then marry that with the fact that if these guys are on suboptimal plans, but claims in the long term goes up, then what happens? So what happens to this unit economics? So I think it's fascinating to see, and at least the pandemic has been in that sense an eye opener for for me as well as I'm sure for many other folks. So I think the jury is still out on many of these things. What I can say probably with certainty is that on balance for life insurance as a category, I would say this has probably been a positive development. And I think especially if you can bring digital transformation fairly quickly in this environment, then I think anybody who can get that done stands to benefit immensely. Especially because, in my experience, anything that you do successfully on the digital front always has got a positive impact on unit economics, right? So that's the way I would probably look at this. But Manu, just happy to sort of pass the baton to you. I think your thoughts here would be a lot more insightful than mine. Thanks.
Very well said, Shubha. Very well said, and completely agree with some of the comments you made around the lack of predictability. Right? I'll give you a sense. So I joined the firm around end of January, and I thought I had some more time before I get into the kitchen. But unfortunately, the moment I joined, the maid went on leave. Right, so COVID forced me to start cooking very, very early. But one big learning that happened as a result of that calamity, right, was a very deep realization on two fronts. One, the customer mindset is very different when you think about acquisition of a customer and when you think about retention of a customer. See, on the acquisition front, there is a lot of, I would say, increased awareness and increased sensitivity around pure term insurance. However, this is also a time which is also marked with significant decrement in the markets. And hence, all the unit-linked plans also have taken a significant downturn in terms of demand, because people do not see insurance now as lucrative an option for investment as they saw otherwise. So I would say there's a balancing of the portfolio effect that is happening, Subra, here, because we see that we are writing almost 200% of protection business that we were writing last year. However, just to give you a sense, life insurance penetration in India is only 2.7%. Right? So there's a huge, I would say, distance to go in terms of awareness on what does one feel to be secure, right? What is the desire of a typical Indian to feel secure financially, all right, or secure through a life instrument. While Max Life has been pretty much at the spearhead of driving the entire, what we call as the India Protection Quotient, IPQ, and it's a great initiative that's been spearheaded by Max Life for the entire industry to increase the overall awareness of need for life insurance in our people. But COVID has had a very, I would say, a balancing sort of an effect, a portfolio rebalancing effect. Right? That's one. But when you look at the retention piece of the side of the equation, it has definitely strained the retention desire for customers purely because of the economic hardship. And especially if you look at investment-based insurance products, which are more unit-linked, for example, and when people start seeing a huge decrement in their value of their asset because the markets are moving down, the ability to retain those policies also becomes equally difficult. Right? So first, from a customer acquisition perspective and a retention perspective, slightly counterbalancing forces. Right? Two, when we look at the behavior or the digital capability required for us to rewire ourselves, insurance was a very personal, one-to-one selling model, and the whole of insurance industry worked on that deep connect, that especially firms that depended a lot on the agency or a proprietary channel, which Max Life does, for example. Right? It is a deeply personal model where you need your agent to tell you everything about a very complex product, where the only thing you're selling is a promise, and that a promise that will get delivered decades down the road, and the only thing that drives P&L is the time value of money and your ability to forecast either the mortality or forecast the time value of money. Right? That's the balance. In such a complex product, where even to explain Hey, whether you do a 5-pay policy or a 10-pay policy, which means you pay it in 5 years or 10 years upfront, and then there's a balance benefit that carry on for Y number of years. And by the way, after Y number of years, you will get a monthly payment or a lump sum for Z amount of time. It is a fairly mathematical complex product, and hence the regulation around it also forces the life insurance companies to really do a great benefit illustration. That, hey, is the customer really aware of the benefit? Now, with that complexity and that personal sort of a model, so difficult to rewire that model very quickly in a situation where you can't meet the customer, you can't be face to face with the customer. So a big part of the transformation that had to be done immediately to conserve the business was around how do you change this in-person sales model to a completely virtual selling model. Two, how do you drive governance of such a sales model, which initially used to be a very feet on street governance, very much in-person sort of a governance, to a truly distributed governance. From a mind shift perspective, it also meant people changing their belief from an input-based measure to a completely outcome-based measure, right? All my operation folks today are working from home. I really don't care how much time they spend in front of the desktop. I'm going to just measure them a number of policies they can process per day. And that is a mindset change as well, because it is very different from a pre-world where everybody was on the shop floor. It's like a big farm out there, and people are there, people are collaborating. Yes, it does drive a big rethinking around how do you drive camaraderie? How do you drive the team bonding, right? Some of these elements have definitely taken a hit in a pure digital, virtual sort of a world. And there are innovative ways we are thinking about how to actually deal with that challenge. But those are challenges. But the first response was really around the idea of a digital selling model, right? A non-in-person model. The second idea was around how do you drive the entire operational aspect of the company, the fulfillment aspect of the company, to actually do remote fulfillment. How do you drive that governance then? And finally, how do you now drive unique methodologies, unique messaging, unique customer interactions to motivate people to pay? Because it's not just a question of new sales, it's also a question of almost 3 times more or 4 times more collection book that you typically maintain as a company, right? How do you drive or incentivize people to pay up for the premiums in such a difficult economic time? So those are, I would say, the key transformation drivers for a life insurance company in a post-COVID world, right? And what we have learned very, very briefly is that there is a muscle that was required to react to the incident that we had to build immediately. But there is a muscle that we have to build long-term permanently, even when there is a vaccine out there, even when this is behind us. What we believe that COVID will fundamentally transform the way we operate, the way we sell, the way we retain, the way we interact with our customers permanently. Things like work from home, we don't think it's only a COVID situation where it is there to stay. Because people have realized the futility of real estate investments in the COVID world, right? So some of these muscles, some of these changes are for here to stay. And my desire and my goal as a chief operations officer of the company is to make sure that we retain that strength even when COVID is behind us.
So what does that mean? Maybe Shalak, I'm hijacking your next question here, but you spoke of how some of these muscles have to be built in the short term, some need to survive and sort of stand the test of post-COVID as well. So purely, if I sort of dive into one function which is of particular interest, which is sales and marketing, how do you think what sort of short and long term muscles, if I can call it that, do you see getting built to sort of collaborate with customers and in general just drive better customer experience?
And just to add to that, while the long term strategy is also as important as the short term one of the biggest uptakes for companies such as yours will be right now is how fast you can bring that cutting edge digital product to market, right? and how much you can surpass your competitor by. So how are you sort of trying to balance out what Subra just mentioned?
Great question, Shalaka. In fact, we just had a board meeting last week, and a very common resounding, I would say, understanding and agreement across the board was that this is the time to invest in the long-term muscle, first of all. And digital is that long-term muscle, right? One. Two, when you look at sales and marketing specifically as a function, Subra, and I'll come back to your question, Shalaka, as well, in terms of how do you make those trade-offs, right? But if you look at even sales and marketing as a function, I'll give you a very simple example that will make the choices real, right? The whole idea of conversions, how do you recruit an agent, right? That effort that we see today post-COVID of driving a conversion has gone up almost 100%. The number of recruitment agencies or recruitment effort, if I would unitize it, I'm spending today double the effort to retain the business conversion that I had a year ago, right? Now, while that is something that is a short-term response, but it cannot be a long-term response because it will cause fatigue. It will cause frictions. It will cause inefficiency as we go forward. So the question today is not about how can I ramp up a much bigger machinery. The question is about how can I discover a new target segment where the propensity to convert is much better than what I have done in the past, right? So the leverage of analytics, the leverage of data sciences, the leverage of finding new potential target segments, finding new potential mortality segments, because maybe the parameters that I used in the past help me only discover, let's say, 5 key mortality segments. My ability tomorrow will be increased multifold if I'm able to create 10 such segments and find 10 such segments. I'll be able to price my products better. I'll be able to create new products better, right? So now the world is shifting from the sheer effort phase, which was required to sustain the business initially, to an intelligent effort phase, where how do I build some of these permanent capabilities, leveraging what I call as 3 dimensions of digital value. 1, intelligence. How do I make sure my processes are innately intelligent, which means I get more bang for the buck for the same effort. 2, experience centric. Everything that I do is customer experience insight, right? Customer experience first. And 3, automation, where how can I drive superior efficiency for us to drive the same outcome or a much better scaled outcome with a much lesser manual input, right? These are the 3 levers that we believe are going to significantly transform every aspect of the process that we do today, especially in sales and marketing, right? Also in sales, it's also about driving the whole sales governance. As I said, distributed governance, dashboarding, intelligent nudges, gamification. These ideas will have far deeper relevance today in a distributed, not in person sort of a sales force than they have ever been before, because I will not be there in front of a person to have that motivation, to have that one-on-one connect, to have that personal touch-driven motivation component that I always had in a face-to-face sort of a context. Right? So those are the typical examples, Subra, that I see in sales and marketing. And then, Shalaka, coming back to your question around how do you make the choice of here and now versus later? See, some of these digital transformation elements we have to start working on today. But some of these are also very foundational in nature, right? You'll certainly figure out that you want to do a lot of great customer 360 analytics, but your data system is not ready for it. Or you'll find that there's a very deep desire to do social media or social text-based analytics, but maybe you don't have the right infrastructure to even consume that data, right? So and also a big part is people skills. Never before am I feeling that I hope every single person that we hire in every single function should be digitally savvy, right? I belong to an industry where when you look at the type of agents that come on board and the type of work, especially in the agency, right? These may be housewives. These may be people who are actually looking at insurance as an alternative earning source. They have never been to, let's say, a postgraduate college, right? How do you provide great assets in their hands so they can be equally efficient as somebody who's led a very digital sort of a savvy life, right? It's also where technology, we believe, is a great leveler. And if built properly, digital is a great leveler. We believe that those trade-offs have to be done today. We have to do those today so that we can really take the advantage at the other end of the COVID journey when we can differentiate ourselves significantly from other players.
So Subra, one of our closing questions: how would you, as a leader of a CDP company, what would you sort of recommend to some of these insurance leaders, since you work with multiple insurance leaders, right? And most of them want to go big or go home on digital transformation now. So, and most probably not all of them are going to have eminent successes, right? Some are really going to outshine others. So how do you sort of propose that happening? And I would love it if you could just use Manu's pointers and build on it, right? One being the strong sort of foundation and three core pillars on top of it, namely intelligence, experience, and automation, right? It would just be a great segue. Please go on.
I was actually exactly going to do that. I thought Manu presented a very, very powerful way of looking at this, right? So it is, if you can build any digital on the foundation of, I would say, intelligence, customer, customer experience and automation, I think it's built for scale, right? So I think from that perspective, I would say that any sort of transformation of this kind along these three foundational pillars, right, fundamentally requires from an ingredient perspective, if I can call it that, right? It requires, since Manu used the cooking analogy earlier, I think from an ingredient standpoint, it will require a lot of access to customer data, customer touch points, right? That is the starting point. And I think Manu spoke about how hard it is to create, for example, a customer 360-degree view, which to me is the starting point for an effective execution, right? On a strategy like this, right? So I think in all my conversations with folks who are at the forefront of these kinds of transformations, right? Generally, this is the starting point. How can I understand my customer more holistically, in a much more in-depth fashion, and more importantly, how can I understand them as and when they're thinking? How close can I mimic their thought process so that the delay between their thinking and the time I can actually go and act and influence or help them really starts coming down, right? And so therefore, no wonder that a technology like CDP, and now, sorry for the plug, but I think it really is very close to my heart, so I'm just bringing that out. So the CDPs generally are the foundational piece of technology that you would use to make sure that you can execute on this kind of transformation, right? So because fundamentally what a CDP would allow you to do is, as the customer is taking those footsteps, whether it is towards acquisition or towards a retention or towards a servicing request, a CDP would really allow you to make sure that you understand those footsteps, which generally tends to happen across different systems, and create a more holistic, unified understanding of that user, and then make it available for multi-channel activation, right? And more importantly, be able to therefore have a system that is able to intervene as quickly as possible into this journey, right? So that it would be my sort of big contribution, which is, okay, it's important to have this kind of a framework, but what are the foundational pieces of technology that allow you to execute on this? And for me, that starting point is definitely the something like a CDP, right? Manu, anything you would want to add here?
No, fantastic. I think, Subra, I completely agree that what makes real is more of a platform approach than an individual business functionality approach.
Yeah.
right? Definitely. And if we are able to provide that platform where various what I call signals of customer behavior, where signals of customer transactions, of customer feedback can all come in together and help me predict the next intent or the next best action. I think that's where the differentiation in the future world will lie. My ability to predict better than what my competition can. But very completely agree.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Sure, and the way we are seeing it right now, Manu, I mean, we being a part of the customer success team. So one of the ways I also see a CDP and what it does is it really has, each team has each other's backs, mostly sales and marketing. So say if, your prospect just inevitably is going to block the call center representative, right? How does marketing then step in, get that customer's data seamlessly and sort of try to nurture in a more non-intrusive manner? So all those sort of use cases we are really strongly starting to see now, and insurance leaders like you and others really, sort of buying into that entire, promise of it. So yeah, I mean, any closing thoughts from either of you before, we close?
Despite all that we do in building our firm and keeping our firms intact and secure, I think it's equally important for all of us to be safe, for all of us to be secure, our families to be secure, and as I said, while there is a big agenda around organizational transformation, I also believe that all of us have in many ways embarked on a journey of self-transformation as well, which is posed by this COVID. And it is also giving us a lot of time for self-reflection in terms of how do we think about sustaining ourselves through this challenge. So that's the only thought I leave with, that I hope everybody is safe, everybody is secure, and get behind this very, very quickly.
I couldn't have put it better myself. So yeah. Manu, thanks a lot. I think this has been a very, very insightful session for us. I think, our audience is really going to enjoy this and listening to your inputs and your experience. So thank you very much once again for joining this session. Appreciate your time.
Thanks so much, Manu.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
All right.